Good afternoon. Welcome to the Authors Hour. My name is Fred Durham, and I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a volunteer organization whose mission is to promote writing and writers on the institution grounds and beyond by both supporting and supplementing the activities of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We sponsor several events every week. On Sundays at 5 o'clock in the prose room on the second floor of this building, writers and listeners 18 years old and above, and it looks like you all qualify, are invited to participate in an open mic session. On Fridays at 1:15 in the garden room on the first floor of this building, we offer an informal critique session. Writers are invited to bring in 10 copies of one single-spaced page of their prose or poetry for feedback, guided by John Brankingham, a professional writer who has taught courses at the Writers Center. You pay for the courses, the informal critique is free. And today, as part of the Tuesday Authors Hour reading series, a Chautauqua author will read from her work. After our author reads, I will tell you about some special events, and then we will also have a chance for some Q&A. So try to remember any questions that arise. Our reader, Patricia Averbach, a former director of the Chautauqua Writers Center, began her writing career at 16 as literary assistant, and I'll probably butcher her name, Francia Desserka. Close enough for government work, right? To my wife, I said that because she was a federal employee. The Jewish American author of The Immigrant Experience. A native Clevelander, she lived as a landed immigrant in Canada for many years. Dreams of Drowning, Bedazzled Ink 2024, was a finalist for the Tucson Festival of Books Literary Award and Chanticleer's Somerset Award for Literary Fiction. Previous novels include Painting Bridges from Bottom Dog Press back in 2013 and Resurrecting Rain, Golden Antelope Press 2020. That was nominated for a Pushcart Prize, which is sort of the top prize among smaller independent presses. Her poetry chapbook, Missing Persons, Wordwood Publishing in 2013, won the London-based Lumen Camden Prize and was cited by Times of London Literary Supplement in November 2014 as one of the best fall collections of the year. Her work appears in the anthology 101 Jewish Poems for the Third Millennium by Absent Poetry Press 2021. And I think we've also going to be presenting something from her work in progress. Right? She lives with her husband, Mark, in Beechwood, Ohio, and she's now visiting her daughters, her far-flung daughters in Toronto, Maui, and Toulouse at Averbach.
Start off with Dreams of Drowning, which was the book released last year. But looking around, I realized that a lot of you have already heard me read from this book, and some of you, bless you, have even bought it and read it yourself. So I'm going to start off with an excerpt from my current work in progress. It's a book called Glenville Girls. At least that's the working title. Are there any old Clevelanders in attendance? If you suburbs. Yeah, you might know Glenville. Back in 1938, when this book is set, it was a overwhelmingly kind of middle-class Jewish community. This needs a little introduction. As the United States tilts toward fascism and experiences a resurgence of anti-Semitism, I was reminded of an earlier period in American history when democracy was at risk. During the run-up to the Second World War, while all eyes were on Europe, where Hitler was running roughshod over Poland, Austria, Denmark, Norway, and France, and where brutal laws aimed at eradicating the Jewish population were being enforced, a less publicized vein of fascism and racism was gaining ascendancy right here at home. 1938 was not a comfortable time to be Jewish, Black, an immigrant, or a homosexual in America. Now it seems everything old is new again, and it seemed like the right time for this novel. Glenville Girls is the story of three women, two living, one dead, confronting challenges of a changing world on the brink of the Second World War. I'm going to read an excerpt from the middle of the novel. It's April of 1938, and the Schneiderman family has gathered around the Seder table to celebrate the holiday of Passover. Joseph, the German-born patriarch of the family, has just concluded the service when David, his son, who moved to Los Angeles 14 years ago, surprises them by arriving with Margaret, his new bride. David's sister, Edna, a 43-year-old spinster, and his niece Izzy are also at the table, along with Edna's old heartthrob, Sam, Sam's mother, and Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, old friends and neighbors. This is Joseph speaking to his new daughter-in-law. So, Mrs. Schneiderman, tell me more about yourself. I must say you're the most wonderful surprise. Her grandfather, this is Izzy narrating, her grandfather was beaming. Izzy could practically see golden sunbeams shooting from his head. Thank you. Margaret colored modestly, the perfect blushing bride. She didn't look much older than the girls Izzy went to college with. A little young for Uncle David, Izzy thought. Margaret took her husband's hand and beamed back. There's not much to tell. I grew up in a farm in Oklahoma, but we had to leave when things got bad. We were just another family of Okies heading west, but we were lucky. We all got jobs once we made it to Los Angeles. An awkward silence fell over the table. Grandfather's brow furrowed as he examined his new daughter-in-law more closely. There Jews in Oklahoma? David put a protective arm around his wife's shoulders. I'm sure there are, but Margaret doesn't happen to be one of them. That's why I didn't tell you when we got married. I wanted you to meet her first, so you could see for yourself what a prize she is. Izzy watched the joy drain from her grandfather's face. The transition was almost instantaneous. Yes, he conceded. I can see she's a lovely girl. But how will you live? How will you raise children? How does this work? We'll be fine, David reassured him. Los Angeles isn't like Cleveland. Our friends are all happy for us. There are lots of mixed marriages in our circle, and no one thinks anything about it. I heard about Los Angeles. It's a very modern place. Mrs. Lewis was almost as old as Zeta, but she'd been born in Cleveland. So, where are your people from? Oklahoma, I told you, Margaret answered. No, before that. Where did they live before Oklahoma? Mrs. Lewis persisted. Pennsylvania, near McKeesport. My great-grandfather moved to Oklahoma to get the land the government was giving away through the Homestead Act. Mrs. Lewis wasn't satisfied. I'm asking where your family came from originally. You don't look like an Indian. They must have come from somewhere. Edna broke in. That's enough, Esther. This is a Seder, not a quiz show. I don't mind. If we're going to be family, you ought to know who I am. Margaret was a trooper. Izzy was impressed that she hadn't wilted under Mrs. Lewis's rude question. I don't know exactly where my family came from. We've been in America a long time. But I know my mother's family is mostly German, and my dad's family is English, Dutch, and Cherokee. My great-grandfather Kuiper was a missionary. That's how we met. She looked Mrs. Lewis in the eye. And I may not look like an Indian, but my father's grandmother was definitely Cherokee. So there you are. That's so interesting. Edna broke in before Mrs. Lewis could ask another question. And now your whole family is in California. Joseph's voice was low, practically a whisper. And your parents? What do your parents think about this marriage? Are they happy you've married a Jew? No, to be honest, they aren't. Margaret snapped back, startling Izzy with a sudden change in her demeanor. But my parents are simple people who grew up in the country. They never met a Jewish person before I brought David home. But you're educated people who live in a big city. I was hoping you'd be more open-minded. Maybe even happy for us? This was getting interesting. David had brought home a wife with fun. Izzy didn't say anything, just sat back and watched. The warm, open faces around the table had frozen, except for Sam's. He'd been silent during most of the conversation, but now he came to life. I'm sure you're right. This is the 20th century. Who made those old rules anyway? People should be able to love whoever they want, and other people should just leave them alone. Why do they care what other people do anyway? It isn't hurting them. Mrs. Mayer looked appalled at her son's outburst and seemed about to chastise him when, to Izzy's surprise, Edna spoke up. I'm with Sam, 100%. We're lucky to have such a charming and talented new member of the family. I couldn't be happier. She held up her almost empty wine glass and toasted. To love and to the happy couple. To love and the happy couple, Sam and Izzy responded. There was a long, painful silence as the other guests shifted in their chairs and studied one another's faces, not sure which side to support, until her grandfather picked up his glass. To love and the happy couple, he mumbled, as his lips quivered and his eyes started to fill. The others repeated, to love and the happy couple, although none of them appeared happy. Her grandfather put down his glass and turned toward David. He started to say something else, but wiped his eyes and shook his head instead. It's going to be okay, Edna assured him. Things are different in California. They'll be fine. I hope so. I hope they're very happy, but he looked at his son. Do you know how it feels? You'll never attend your grandson's bris? Never see him called to Torah? My father would have set sugar for me if I had done such a thing, but I'm not my father. I won't do that. I wish you and your bride every happiness. He praised the couple with a sad smile. Now, please, you'll have to excuse me. I need to lie down. He pushed back his chair and shuffled from the room. Wow, I didn't think he'd take it so hard. David poured himself another glass of wine and downed it in 2 long gulps. He'll come around once he gets to know her. Honestly, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. He pulled her chair closer to his and took her hand. Margaret was clearly shaken. She disengaged her hand from David's and said, maybe we should leave. We could spend the night at a hotel. No, please stay. Edna was emphatic. There's a double bed in Izzy's room, if you don't mind the clutter. She can sleep on the couch. I don't want to put you out. It'd be better if we go. Margaret looked ready to jump up and call a taxi without waiting for David to finish his dessert. Yes, it's getting late. I think it's time for us to go as well. Mrs. Lewis stood up and her obedient husband followed suit. The Seder was lovely as always. So nice to see you again, David. Now, where did we leave our coats? There was a general shuffling, a pushing of chairs, and perfunctory kisses as the Lewises left. Once they were gone, Margaret turned to her husband. David, could you get our suitcases? I think we should leave as well. Edna took hold of Margaret's arm, as he could see the chagrin in her aunt's face. Please, don't go. My father's old-fashioned, and this came as a bit of a shock, but he'll adjust. I'm sure he'd be devastated if you're not here in the morning. You ought to stay, Sam said, siding with Edna. There have been a lot of changes around here, and I think David needs to know about them. We all have a lot of catching up to do, and everyone wants to get to know Margaret better. Margaret sat back down, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. How about some music? I'll turn on the radio. Edna walked over to the Philco console and began twisting the dial. There was general static and squawking between channels before WGAR clicked on, and a rich, mellifluous voice intoned, "We have lived to see the day that Jews, modern Shylocks, have grown fat and wealthy, praised and deified because they have perpetuated the ancient crime of usury under the modern racket of statesmanship." Edna clicked off the radio and pulled her hand away as though she touched fire. Margaret's face darkened, but her voice remained calm. "That was Father Coughlin. I'd recognize his voice anywhere. My parents are big fans." Edna arched her eyebrows. Izzy could see her recalibrating her opinion of her new sister-in-law. "I know who it was," she replied coldly, "but I'm sure you'll understand that we're not big fans." Margaret shook her head sadly. "That's just who my folks are. They can't see that he's a vile, mean-spirited man spreading hate over the radio." Izzy breathed a sigh of relief. Margaret wasn't a bigot like her parents. "Why do your parents listen to him? What do they see in him?" "Same as most people, I guess. I mean, millions of people listen to his show. He's against communism, and he sides with working men against the bosses and the big banks. And he's a priest, so they think he's the voice of God. Listen, my folks are good people who lost everything in Oklahoma. So if Coughlin blames the banks, they're with him 100%. And if he says the Jews run the banks, then they believe that too." Margaret leaned forward in her chair and spoke directly to Edna. "But I'm not my parents. I understand that he's a dangerous man who's stirring up hatred and support for Nazis. I get it. I'm on your side." Edna nodded, a small smile visible as she nodded at her sister-in-law. "Good. I'm relieved to hear that because we have relatives in Berlin who are scared for their lives at this very moment. Now, let's talk about something more pleasant. How did you and my brother meet?" "A little luck, probably not next summer, maybe the summer after that." I'll have some copies for all of you.
Yeah,
Do I have time for?
yeah, you have almost 20 minutes.
All right, in that case, you're going to get more Dreams of Drowning. Dreams of Drowning, for those of you who don't know, is a work of magical realism that moves between real time, where lives are buffeted by political conflict, tragedy, and loss, and another mysterious time where pain is healed and love is eternal. It moves between 1973 and 1993, and there are two different protagonists whose stories eventually come together. I'm going to start right at the beginning with the female protagonist, a young expat American named Amy. This is the prologue. "Help!" Joni's shouts are barely audible above the wind and the roar of the outboard motor as she struggles to keep her head above the waves. I put my hands over my ears and close my eyes, but she's still there, still struggling to stay above the water. The panic in her eyes, a mirror of my own. Her pale, freckled skin, her green eyes fraught with horror, identical to mine. I watch helpless, my heart pounding, until she disappears, as she always does, beneath the roiling waters of Lake Ontario. Part 1, Amy, 1973. "Amy, wake up." Mrs. Klein was shaking my shoulder. "You can't sleep here. If you need to sleep, go home." How had I fallen asleep with the clatter and bang of the old linotype reverberating through the shop? I picked my head up from the drafting table and struggled to bring Mrs. Klein into focus. She was as solid and gray as the press as she ran. I felt a chill as her steely eyes took in my tousled hair and bloodshot eyes, then moved to the floor where a chaotic mess of colored markers, X-Acto knives, and technical pens lay scattered. I'm sorry, I didn't sleep again last night, but I'm okay now. I'll get back to work. I was already on my knees gathering up the fallen art supplies as quickly as I could. When was the last time you got a proper night's sleep? I took a moment to consider. 1971? Esther Klein was my mother's best friend, more like my aunt than my employer, but she wasn't amused. My literally falling asleep on the job had pushed her too far. That's not funny. You need to see a doctor. Now that is funny. How am I supposed to do that? Legal Ontario residents had magic OHIP cards that entitled them to almost unlimited medical care, but she knew I'd slipped into the country illegally and had no papers. You can pay him in cash the same way we pay you, so there's no record. I'll explain the situation to my doctor. Sorry, can't risk it. I've got to stay under the radar, but thanks anyway. Mrs. Klein's, a deep crease appeared between Mrs. Klein's eyes. Go home, drink some tea, take a hot bath, and think about whether you want a future here or not. My heart skipped a beat. Was she threatening to fire me? She knew I'd be on the street or worse without this job. I could hear a slight quaver in my voice as I responded. What about this poster? I pointed to the design job I'd been working on. They need it by tomorrow. She examined the work on my design table and nodded her approval. You can finish in the morning. Now, go home and get some sleep. What was the point of going home? It was easier to sleep in a noisy print shop than back in my apartment where Joni's ghost followed me from room to room. It had happened 2 years ago, yet her desperate calls for help still woke me from panicked dreams of drowning. I gathered up my coat and purse, wondering if I had just ruined my last chance for a new life. I was halfway out the door when Mrs. Klein called me back. And don't forget the party tonight. We're expecting you at 7. I thought of rushing out the door, pretending I hadn't heard, but Mrs. Klein was standing right behind me. I paused and took a breath. Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation, but like I said, I don't do parties. She stepped between me and the door, blocking my only means of escape. This has gone on long enough. You're not the one who died. Mr. Klein and Eddie, our pressman, were watching from the back room. I didn't want to make a scene, but a party? I'm sorry. I know you want to help, but I'm just not ready. Me, the good time girl of Fairport High, turning down another party. Joni wouldn't have believed it. Mrs. Klein took an umbrella off the coat rack and handed it to me. You'll need this, and you're coming to the party. There'll be people your age from the sailing club. Was she kidding? Sailors were the last people I'd want to meet. The very thought gave me the willies. I started to say no again, but she wouldn't listen. Consider it a condition of your employment, and I mean it. Oh, and bring a box of baklava from that Greek bakery near your apartment. No excuses. Then she shoved me out into the rain and shut the door. 4 hours later, I was pounding on the glass door of Cosmo's Bakery, desperately trying to catch the attention of a young man in a white apron who was pulling trays from a display case. He looked up, pointed at his watch, and shook his head. Despite my concerns, I'd overslept and arrived too late. Any other night, I'd have run into Loblaws for brownies or a coffee cake, but Mrs. Klein wanted baklava, and I couldn't risk disappointing her again. I put my hands together in mock prayer, and this time the man came forward and unlocked the door. We'll close it, he said, pointing to the neon sign in the window. He spoke with an accent that evoked images of an older, warmer country, and as he leaned toward me, I smelled cinnamon and sugar. It was just after 6 o'clock, the evening dusk made darker by clouds, a blustery wind and a spring rain threatening to turn to snow. The bakery's white walls radiated light and warmth as I stood shivering in a miniskirt and thin leather jacket on the damp pavement. I promised my boss baklava. She'll kill me if I don't bring it. He would kill you for this. He looked stern, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. Absolutely, she's mad at me already. Then you'd better come in. I don't want blood on my hands. His body had been blocking the doorway, but now he stepped aside. As I brushed past him, I was unnerved by his physical presence. He wasn't especially tall, yet his broad shoulders and muscular body dominated his face. The shop smelled like home. Not the actual home where I'd grown up with a mother too busy selling real estate to cook, and certainly not the home I'd fled teetering on its foundations. Rather, it smelled like the home I longed for the one that provides shelter from all adversity and comfort for every sorrow. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and felt my own interminable pain subside for just a moment. When I opened my eyes, the baker was watching me with raised eyebrows and a bemused expression. Your shop smells wonderful, absolutely intoxicating, I said, somewhat embarrassed. It's not my shop. I just work here at night. During the day, I work toward a doctorate in economics. He grinned, pleased at disarming me with his revelation. My name's Arcus. He held out his hand. I hesitated for an awkward moment, but how could I insult a man who just saved me from looking too incompetent to buy a box of pastry? I took his hand. Amy. He smiled warmly as his fingers closed over mine. Nice to meet you, Amy. Maybe you're a student too? Me? No, I used to be a student back in the States, but now I just work in a print shop. For some reason, in a country where I tried to be invisible, I wanted him to see me. I studied art. I'm an artist, I added, much to my own surprise. He nodded approvingly as he released my hand. I knew there was something special about you. He assembled a cardboard box and filled it with sticky pieces of nut-filled phyllo dough as we talked. I cringed. There was nothing special about my mediocre artistic talent. What made me special was the disaster I fled my country to escape. It was the reason I kept to myself and avoided idle chit-chat with good-looking men. I tugged at my short skirt, feeling exposed and embarrassed. Why was I even talking with this man? It was dangerous to forget myself. I made a show of looking at my watch. Well, thanks for opening the bakery for me. I really appreciate it, but I've got to get going. How much do I owe you? Nothing. We were already closed, so officially this is yesterday's pastry. No, that's not right. I'm happy to pay whatever it costs. Please take it. We would just throw it away. He pressed a box tied up with blue ribbon into my hand. Oh, your boss is Greek. Do you have other Greek friends as well? The Kleins aren't Greek. Their son and his wife are just going on a Greek island cruise. This is for their bon voyage party. Oh, maybe you've never eaten in a real Greek taverna. Is he asking me on a date? I could feel the little pendant hanging from a chain around my neck grow warm. Maybe it was just my imagination, but it felt like a message from my sister. As my hand touched the gold charm, I could almost hear her voice. What's with you, Mungo? Don't be such a dork. I left the shop 20 minutes later with a baklava and an invitation to dinner at the Olive Tree for the following night. My heart pounded and my mind churned as I waited for the streetcar. What had I done? Why had I said yes? Arcus was charming, but that was no excuse. I had to remain inconspicuous and live in the shadows. Would Joni really want me to go on partying as though nothing had happened, when she'd never see the sunshine, never dance again? Mrs. Pine was wrong. Something in me had died. I was a recluse, an insomniac. I padded around my apartment at night talking to ghosts. It had been 2 years since the accident, but I still couldn't look in a mirror because it was always Joni who stared back at me with hollow, sunken eyes.
You have about 5 minutes if you want it.
Sing or tap dance?
No, what? Okay.
but I don't think anybody would like that.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Beth. There are some annual events that the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center sponsors, but we're getting to that time of the summer where just about all of them are in the past tense. However, God willing, they will happen again next year, so I will mention them so you can file them away for 2026. Back on Sunday, July 13th, on Vesta Plaza, we have the annual Authors Among Us book fair. That's when Chautauquan authors get to sell and sign their books. That will happen again next year in mid-July. We usually pair it with one of the craft fairs. The annual writing contest that we sponsor, the deadline, the closing was July 27th. The award ceremony will be August 10th at 2:30 in the Hall of Philosophy. Also, we'll live stream it on Zoom and then upload it to YouTube. Okay. Just last night, the Friends held the annual Robert Kinsey Favorite Poem Project at 5 o'clock in the Hall of Philosophy. At this gathering, selected Chautauquans read their favorite poem and briefly explained why it means so much to them. You can check out the video of that event, since it is in the past, on the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center channel on YouTube. So if you search for our channel, you'll find not only that, but every event since 2020, when you might remember that year when we all went virtual. So things have been recorded since then. A reminder that we will have a Q&A and books for sale in a while. We actually had a second speaker scheduled for today, Dr. Frank Bowen. You may have seen the name in the daily. For several years, he was a physician specializing in neonatal health and wrote a book called Your Baby's Beginning. That was an interactive guide for parents through the first weeks of their child's life. After that, Frank headed a volunteer organization that provided free care to indigent patients in South Carolina. Along the way, he began to spend time at Chautauqua and also write poetry. Today, he was supposed to read from his parent side, also share some relevant poems. Unfortunately, shortly after arriving at Chautauqua in mid-July, Frank suddenly became ill and passed on July 17th. In his honor, I would like to at least try to read one of his poems that his wife, Scotty, has kindly presented us. Change. There's a new plant in my garden, poking its green nose through the mulch. Unless you look carefully, it's well hidden. For a while, I'll support a hunch. My garden is a work of art, carefully planned. It has no room for weeds or new flowers. I'll uproot that into the hedges to preserve the order of my spot. Reaching the warm spring wind, much smoother, says, no, I'd better not. My garden is a work of art, carefully planned. I've worked and fought on it for hours. The flowers growing larger, stronger. Its color complements the others. I look at it each time longer, and weeds are now my flowers broken. My garden is a work of art. A moment of silence for Frank. And then let's give him the applause that I wish he were here to receive. Right? We do have time for Q&A. If you have any questions or that, about writing or writing, whatever. Any questions? Way back there. Could you repeat the question and maybe come forward? We had trouble hearing it.
The reading from the Gilbert Girls. Thank you. We can expect that to come. Well, first I have to finish it. Sure. And then it's usually maybe 2 years after that. So I don't think we'll be seeing it before 2027 at the earliest. Okay. Stay tuned. How do we know what the new actual title is? Well, yeah, when the time comes, I will be hanging banners. And
Yeah, and we'll talk to the CLSC about
and I would love to, to share it with everybody. I can't wait to finish it and see anything in print, but it's going to be a while. Okay. I can go back to my old publisher.
Thank you. Or more likely figured. Any other questions? I have one. Certainly. Since you write both poetry and prose, and novels, do they come from a different place? Is there a different process? Is there a different inspiration? Or there are some things that you say, well, I could be either else with the story.
The best prose comes from the same place as the poetry, but sadly I'm not able to always channel that part of my brain when I'm writing prose. But when I do, it's a very good thing. It's when the prose starts to sing instead of plod. And I think having spent a lot of time writing poetry, what I have learned that does carry over regardless is the enormous value of concision, of cutting words, making things as tight as possible. And kind of, the less you say, the more you cut, the better it is. Yeah.
Last chance, anything else? Let's give another. Well, we do have a raised hand there. Last second at the buzzer. Yeah.
I'm not but you have the whole story in your head.
Okay. She was asking if I have the whole story in my head when I begin a novel. And I just want to say that these ladies have heard a reading from Dreams of Drowning previously at Bookstore One in Sarasota. The proprietor of which is here with us today, George Court. Thank you very much. And the answer to that question is kind of an old axiom in writing that writers are either plotters or pantsers. And plotters are people who have the whole novel outlined and they know exactly chapter by chapter what they're going to write. And the pantsers write by the seat of their pants. And I am much more a pantser. However, that said, when I begin, I know where it's going to end. I may not know, point by point, what's going, all the different events that will occur in the middle. but I do know where I'm going. And I usually have a couple guideposts that I need to hit along the way. And this theater was one of those guideposts. So I was really happy when I finally hit it. That feels wonderful. Yeah.
Sort of a follow-up to my previous question and connecting with what you just said. Do you find that's true with poetry as well? Do you know how a poem is going to end when you begin writing it?
No. No. No surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. I'm always surprised.
I just wondered because I know in my own writing, my okay poems, I know where they're headed, and they talk interestingly. My better poems, they surprise me, and they tend to use the word think. They tend to think more. And I've heard a lot of poets say that. Even formal poets who know that they're going to write a sonnet or what that final turn is going to be. Sometimes it causes that. Any further questions? Let's give that another round of applause. And then I just have a few announcements about upcoming events. Tomorrow on this course, the Young Readers Program will discuss Andy Thomas's Nick Blake and the Remarkable The Manifesto of State, and also J versus K by Jerry Kraft and some guy named Kwame Alexander. And on Thursday at 3:30, Kevin Newton will be discussing his novel, My Document. On Fridays at 12:15, there's a community reading on what is called the Summer on the Steps program. This week, 4 published Chautauqua writers will be featured. One of them is Nick. Okay, so that's a self-serving announcement. Aaron Wyatt, John Brentingham, and Chris with a last name I can't remember will be reading, plus the spotlight readers from the workshop. And they'll also unveil the community poem. If you don't know, each week you get a chance to contribute to a poem about the theme of the week. The theme this week is one, and the difference one person can make. And the short version of the poem is to Bruce Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, somewhere in what you contribute. You can either go to poetry.chq.org and keep scrolling, saying you want to contribute, and eventually you'll get to the prompt. Or you can stop by the Poetry Maker space, which is near the plaza in the Whole Cliff, where the veranda for the CLSC used to be, if you're an old timer. Our sister RC, Chautauqua Theater Company, will present the world premiere of the script workshop last year at C.A. Johnson for Witnesses, formerly titled Tell Me You're Dying. I saw the workshop last year. It was a dynamite script. Please join us next week for the office hour as Laura Lillibridge will be reading some award-winning personal essays, and this poet named Susan Nussbaum will be sharing pieces from her latest collection, The Uncertain Voyage. I also meant to mention when I was talking about Robert Pinsky's favorite poem project that George Court was the one who brought Robert Pinsky here. He then initiated that tradition back in 2009, I do believe. So thank you again, Georgia. Please consider joining the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. If you go to our website, chq.org/SDWC, you'll find more information about all these events and a membership form. And special offer. Once we get in August, if you join this year, the membership is good next year as well. This video will be available on the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center YouTube channel, so speak it out if you want to see things again, or spread the word if you want other people to, if they're past reading, if there are wonderful questions, etc. Anyway, hope to see you at some of our sponsored events, maybe next week's office hours. Thank you.